I think they're in there somewhere.
Hey, Bill, how's it up?
Okay. Oh, bye. Bike is okay.
Did you try sitting in that white chair, the white plastic chair?
Hello.
You're uncomfortable. Back, your hip.
Okay, folks, could I please request everyone to mute themselves?
Did you try sitting in that white chair, the white plastic chair?
Hello.
You're uncomfortable. Back, your hip.
Okay, folks, could I please request everyone to mute themselves?
Did you try sitting in that white chair?
Okay. Sorry, just resolving a couple of technical matters here. Oh,
Turn out Jeannie's hair. I think Jeannie's hair looks cute. I never remember having her have a good hair. Yeah, but she's doing a good job of it.
Est-ce que tu t'as arrêté de gueuler là?
Et là, c'est carton sur le lavabo.
Non, mais arrête de gueuler, arrête de gueuler.
Alan, I'm going to make you co-host, and you will have to go in and mute everybody who is not speaking. Alan, can you hear me?
I'm still on.
I will do that.
Okay.
I will do that.
C'est bien. Comment y accéder là?
If you can, please mute everyone, and then I will unmute the people who need to speak. Okay, I've unmuted myself. That's fine. Excellent. So let's go. There's still a couple of people not muted. Okay. Okay, folks, sorry about the slight confusion. We are nearly ready to start. Let me turn on the recording, the transcript. And Alan, if you would also keep an eye on the waiting room and make sure to admit people as they come in.
Hola, Jesus.
Could I please request everyone to mute themselves? Alan, you please have to look after that. Okay. All right. Okay, we can get started now. Okay. Okay, hi everyone. We are getting started now. Hello and welcome to another webinar organized by the International Manifesto Group. As most of you will know, the International Manifesto Group is an anti-imperialist group supporting the emergence of a multi- and pluripolar world. Our most important activity is holding these webinars about twice a month, informing audiences around the world on key developments that are shaping the struggle for a multipolar, equal, peaceful, and sustainable world. Please check us out at www.internationalmanifesto.org. Please read our manifesto, and if you are so inclined, sign it. Please subscribe to our newsletter, and if you can, please make a donation, small or large. We produce very high-quality discussions and information, and your donations basically help us expand our reach. My name is Radhika Desai. I'm the convener of the International Manifesto Group, and I will moderate this event. Our topic today is the Venezuela Model Hoax, Trump's Phantom Conquest. Venezuela is struggling to recover from the most devastating earthquake, a struggle made harder by long-standing sanctions, the sequestration of Venezuela's assets and gold, and by the Trump administration's secretive control over Venezuela's oil revenues. This tragedy has only added a new layer of anti-Bolivarian propaganda, that the Bolivarian government is botching the earthquake rescue and relief response, that people are turning against it, and many other such canards. And this propaganda comes on top of a wider, more insidious trope that is the subject of our webinar. Sorry, I'm just going to take a break. Alan, if you could please turn down your volume because I'm hearing the echo, or maybe use your headphones. Okay, to continue. To continue, there is much talk about a Venezuela model these days. By bombing Caracas and other Venezuelan cities, kidnapping President Maduro, First Lady and former President of the National Assembly, Celia Flores, Trump is said to have created a new paradigm, not just of regime change, but of even modern colonialism. References to the Venezuela model or the Venezuela paradigm are frequent. Commentators ponder over whether it can be applied to Iran or to Cuba. Whether they think it can be or not, all of them assume that such a model exists and that Trump has effectively placed Venezuela under his control, with interim President Delcy Rodríguez his veritable viceroy in Caracas. The assumption is that the current leaders of Venezuela, whether because they are corrupt or cowardly, have conceded effective control of their country to Donald Trump and the US government, that Venezuela's vast oil wealth and mineral wealth are now or soon can be under the effective control of the US government and US corporations, and thus that the Bolivarian revolution is basically over. All this, we are to believe, has been accomplished by dint of a night of bombing and the kidnapping of the President and First Lady. Such thinking emerges out of an overly simple, not to say exaggerated, conception of how countries, politics, and economies operate. In this declarative understanding of power, those who are powerful are deemed to be able to achieve their objectives simply by demanding their fulfillment, by declaring their achievement. However, the reality of power of societies, economies, and the popular will are far more complex. We have organized this webinar precisely to ponder these complexities. There are undoubtedly many committed to the emancipation of Venezuela and other countries who believe that Venezuela is indeed under the effective control of the US or is well on its way to being so. They argue that the Bolivarian process has been defeated or betrayed and that the left must face up to this unpalatable reality and not indulge in dangerous delusions. While it is important for the left to be clear-eyed about the challenges it faces, it is equally dangerous, not to say politically debilitating, to attribute to your adversary more power than it has and to credit it with greater accomplishment than it deserves. The simple fact is that more than a quarter of a century of a still ongoing revolutionary process has achieved a great deal in Venezuela and earned enormous legitimacy among the people. This history cannot be dialed back, no matter how zealously those with money and arms and missiles might wish to do so. Quite apart from considering the effect of one's judgment on the embattled Bolivarian revolution, there is the question of considering what has actually happened and not happened. In these opening remarks, let me just mention a few points that I believe are important and that may explain why we framed this webinar in the way that we did. Much of the discussion of what has occurred in Venezuela since the 3rd of January and since August last year, when the Trump administration began assembling its armada, and I have to say, I just love how you can make your actions sound much more grandiose than they are by just dusting off an archaic term and putting it to use. So anyway, to come back to the armada, the Trump administration started assembling this armada on the coast of Venezuela. And all of this has been framed in the idea of the Don Road Doctrine. So it is important to clarify, as I've been arguing in one of my videos on Radhika Desai Geopolitical Economy, my YouTube channel, that the so-called Don Road Doctrine heralds no new dawn of US power in the region, but its decline. The original Monroe Doctrine had only asserted the rights of the new nations of the Americas, North and South, to be free of European imperialism. It was not until President Theodore Roosevelt attached his corollary to it in the early 20th century, nearly a century after the Monroe Doctrine was originally proclaimed, that the doctrine acquired the meaning it is so widely seen to have, that the US reserves the right to police the Americas, to control the Americas. This could only happen when US power was beginning to come into its own. Even so, however, the US was far from being in control of events in the Americas, suffering, for instance, the setbacks of the Cuban, Nicaraguan, and Bolivarian revolutions and the wider pink tide in Latin America. The so-called Trump corollary is little more than the result of a profound crisis of governance in the United States itself, caused by its sputtering capitalist system and its enfeebled imperialism. It has required foreign policy to be dictated entirely by domestic political priorities. Nowhere is this betrayed more fully than in the wording of the so-called Trump corollary. This is what it says. It's a short paragraph. It says, we want to ensure that the Western Hemisphere remains reasonably stable and well-governed enough to prevent and discourage mass migration to the United States. We want a hemisphere whose governments cooperate with us against narco-terrorists, cartels and other transnational criminal organizations, that we want a hemisphere that is free of hostile foreign incursion or the ownership of key assets and that supports critical supply chains. And we want to ensure our continued access to key strategic locations. This is not some sort of bold statement that proclaims US hegemony over the Western Hemisphere, but an enumeration of the principal points of discontent within the American public or within the US public that Trump has had to harp on in order to get elected. Mass migration, drugs, China's presence, which may increasingly challenge tenuous supply chains, and of course also US's control over the regions and the cooperation, the willingness of countries in the region to cooperate with the United States, and restricts the United States' freedom of maneuver more generally in the hemisphere. Secondly, the US started amassing its armada in the Caribbean using the excuse of combating narco-terrorism and attacking hapless ships in the fall of 2025 in the hope that the mere threat that this armada represented would cause the Bolivarian government to collapse and regime change to be effected. Only months after this illegal, irresponsible, and murderous
Bah, non, regarde, non, regarde. Oui, bah oui.
Please, please mute yourselves. Sorry, 1 second. Only months after this illegal, irresponsible, and murderous action produced no result, months during which, notwithstanding the grandiose label of Armada, US forces were never enough to launch a ground invasion, that the United States produced the mouse of the kidnapping of the President and First Lady and the bombing of Venezuela's cities out of the mountain of the Armada. This kidnapping, effectively an attempt to decapitate the Venezuelan government, also proved ineffective at regime change. As in Iran, Hydra-like, the government grew a new head. Delcy Rodríguez was sworn in according to the Venezuelan constitution as acting president. No other outcome was possible, given that, thanks to the strength of the Bolivarian process, the United States simply does not have a political alternative on the ground. Corina Machado, notwithstanding her obsequiousness towards Donald Trump, was correctly judged to be incapable of holding power. Finally, while it is true that, penultimate point, while it is true that a number of laws have been passed since the US's illegal incursion into Venezuela that seem to facilitate the easy exploitation of Venezuela's oil and mineral wealth by US corporations, there is absolutely no evidence that said corporations are willing or able to use the opportunities that this new legislation affords. In a televised meeting between Trump and the CEOs of major US oil and mining corporations, the latter effectively told the president that Venezuela is, quote, uninvestable, unquote. The political atmosphere on the ground would be simply too hostile to US corporations to enable such easy exploitation. And finally, while the Trump administration may have acquired control over the oil revenues accruing to Venezuela, it is not possible for it to divert too much of this toward the US without seriously destabilizing Venezuela and creating a bigger headache for the United States in the form of social breakdown and the migration flows that would inevitably come. And the amounts involved are not great, given that decades of sanctions have reduced Venezuela, a country with the world's highest oil reserves in the world, to producing no more than about 1 million barrels of oil per day. So once again, rather than US corporations controlling vast torrents of oil flows and other mineral flows and controlling Venezuelan production of all such commodities, the US is left holding the spigot of arguably the smallest trickle of oil emerging from any major oil producing country, and the legislative concession of the Rodriguez government, in any case something it had to do with a gun pointed towards its head, will prove more or less symbolic. So, having said all that, and sorry to have gone on so long, but I felt I should explain why we framed the webinar in which we did. Let us now go to our speakers. Our speakers will speak for about 15 minutes each, give or take. I will introduce them in turn. And at the end of the speeches, we have 4 speakers. At the end of these speeches, we will have time for questions and answers. So please save them to put before the speakers. Okay, so our first speaker is Jesus Rodriguez Espinoza. He is the editor of the Orinoco Tribune. Jesus, please go ahead. And I hope you can share your PowerPoint as well.
I'm not co-host, yes, but you can make me.
I will give you
yes,
that.
but I have a few words before, sharing the screen, so
Okay.
don't get stressed by that. Thank you for the invitation, first of all, and thank you for the introduction, Rodica. I just want to say hello to a lot of friends that I see out there. And to begin, I wanted to say a few things before sharing with you, like a matrix, like a spreadsheet that I wrote, basically trying to photograph all the criticisms that has been out there in recent months against Venezuela, against Chavismo, and after the January 3rd U.S. invasion. So, but first, I wanted to share with you a few important things. The first one is that after almost 7 months of the U.S. invasion, there is not visible or perceived crack within Chavismo. And I believe that is extremely important for those criticizing, the recent step taken by the Venezuelan government to analyze. I mean, Chavismo, not only its leadership, but its base is united. It's still alive, disregarding all the many things that have been happening, that some of them are pretty questionable. But disregarding all that, there is a sense of unity, and that is important to take into consideration. Another important thing that I wanted to say is that we in Orinoco Tribune, we attach our responsibility, our main responsibility with our readers and with Chavismo. I mean, we focus our journalistic work in supporting Chavismo. course, we are most of the time aligned with our compass in the international solidarity movement, but sometimes we are not aligned, and that's understandable because we are not part of the solidarity international movement. We are a news out. We try to, do our work in the most responsible way for Chavismo mainly. So for that reason, we sometimes publish harsh criticism that we consider might have some constructive criticisms that might help Chavismo, especially in these, complicated times that we are living in recent months. We are also critical in a critical moment with the launching of this. It's important to take this into consideration in this new McCarthyism 2.0 that has been launched by the Trump administration with this summit. A few days ago, anti-communist summit in the U.S. with the persecution of any sign of criticism, protest, not only in the U.S. but all over. And also with the political persecution of the very scarce main global donors that are out there and that has been, persecuted in recent days, in recent months. So there is a clear evidence that they are going after us, and because of that, it's extremely important that all of us, disregarding what political positions we might have, if we are liberal, if we are Marxist, if we are Trotskyist, if we are anarchist, whatever, division is not going to help us, under these circumstances. So for that reason, I believe that we need to push for unity, disregarding the differences and disregarding sometimes, things that you don't like, but we need to work together towards this unity, because if we don't do that, we are going to be smashed by U.S. imperialism. So I believe that that's important. And now I want to share with you, I hope that I can do that now, my screen. Let me see.
You should be able to do it, Jesus.
Yes,
And
I believe.
Jesus, there was some complaint that your voice has some kind of buzz around it. If you can improve the audio at all, that would be great. But
I'm gonna raise the volume, and I'm gonna move a fan that I have around.
Okay.
Because that might be the cause of that.
Great.
No, this is not.
So you should be able to share. You are co-host now.
Okay. I'm having trouble seeing that.
What can you not see? Can you not see the share icon?
Yes, but it's something from my side. It's some permissions that the computer is asking me for that it never asked me before. So I'm gonna try again and see if
there we can. I think you are about to share now. So
okay, let me see. Permission required. It's asking for more permission. Okay. Give me 1 second. I apologize for that. But it's asking me this computer like 10 million permissions. I'm sorry. I believe that I'm going to try to explain it myself. No, I believe that I see it. Okay, let's see. Do you see it?
yes, we see it. Wonderful.
Okay. So that's a spreadsheet. Are you seeing the spreadsheet?
Yeah, we are seeing the spreadsheet.
Okay, perfect. In that spreadsheet, I wrote, as I mentioned, those criticisms that I tried to rescue, the arguments of those claiming treason, the end of Chavismo, and criticism against Chavismo. And also I tried to build like a matrix on under, my personal understanding of the situation in Venezuela, trying to attach some quality to those statements, and these are the characteristic that I choose. I wonder if the criticism, if the statement were constructive or destructive, if they not recognize the reality on the ground in Venezuela, if they promote Chavista division or not, if they promote coup d'etat, which is a possibility also, and no one talks too much about that. If they promote division among international activists, if they promoted Chavista reconfiguration, or if they non-Chavista reconfiguration. I mean, so I try to pass all those values through these statements to see what happens. So the first of them was that January 3rd was a defeat or a premeditated strategy. Some people wonder, and they ask if it was a defeat, what went wrong, what were the causes of the defeat. So I consider this as a constructive criticism, but it doesn't recognize the reality on the ground in Venezuela, and somehow in my opinion, it promotes division among international activists. So I put a color in the X in the matrix, because that way I somehow make a scale of how good or bad those criticisms were. So the green ones are the less destructive ones, while the red ones are the most destructive ones. So I pass through concealing the gravity. This is another statement. Concealing the gravity of the coercion in which Venezuela is being subjected, numbs popular consciousness, undermines patriotic morale, and that is contrary to what is expected of the leadership. That's a very common criticism. I respect that, and for that reason, I put it as a constructive one, but it promotes Chavista, and it also promotes Chavista reconfiguration, but I believe that is a constructive criticism. Presenting the Venezuela government concession to the U.S. as victory is a terrible strategy that will diminish popular support. I also consider that a constructive one, but it does not recognize the reality on the ground, especially the stress that the Venezuelan population has been living for more than a decade of U.S. sanctions, economic crisis, diaspora, you name it. And it also promotes this statement, in my opinion, Chavista reconfiguration. The next one was not denouncing the U.S. January 0 aggression before international organizations is a mistake. And that's something that has been proposed by people inside Venezuela, Chavista people. And I believe that that's a constructive criticism. But maybe it doesn't recognize, and I forgot to put an X there, it doesn't recognize the reality on the ground, which is that Venezuela is under duress. Venezuela is somehow being threatened to a worse military invasion than the one that we lived on January 3rd. And it also promotes, this statement also, in my opinion, promotes Chavista reconfiguration. The next one was not presenting a new military strategy or doctrine to prepare for the new U.S. aggression is a mistake. I believe, again, that's a constructive one. So you can see the X, and that way I want, X's that I put there in the matrix. And the Chavismo is being destroyed is the next one by the current leadership, and the 9, it is not, and the 9, it is not helping the Venezuelan people. I believe that that's a destructive one. It doesn't recognize the reality on the ground, and it somehow promotes Chavista division. And now we go to the ones that I consider a little bit worse, which is Chavismo without anti-imperialism is not Chavismo. I believe that the statement is constructive, but it doesn't recognize the reality on the ground. It promotes Chavista division, and it promotes division among international activists. Who is running Venezuela? That's a very common one. Again, I believe that that's a destructive statement, not recognizing reality on the ground, promoting Chavista division, and promote division among international activists. So I go, through all these statements, and the worst one, in my opinion, were these. The hydrocarbon law is unconstitutional. the law that you mentioned, Rodrigo, one of the laws that you mentioned when you were talking, and in my opinion, it is destructive. It doesn't recognize the reality on the ground again. It promotes Chavista division. It promotes a coup d'etat, which is terrible in my opinion, and it promotes division among international activists, and it numbs Chavista reconfiguration under, after January 3rd. And the last one is Delcy Rodríguez betrayed Chavismo with CIA support. I believe that those two are, I mean, there are many more, but those two are, the worst, and it is destructive, doesn't recognize the same thing like the last one, it falls into all those boxes that I mentioned in the previous one. So the next one is the same thing that I did, but with the arguments of those of us that defend the Bolivarian Revolution and Chavismo. And there, what I noticed is that, of course, all of them were constructive, but I created this promote Chavista reconfiguration and non-Chavista reconfiguration in order to see the difference between these ones, this additional group. And the first one talks about, says that our people continue to resist, sometimes forced to compromise, yet always seeking to create social, economic, and political space to continue deepening our project. It is, of course, a constructive statement, but somehow, in my opinion, it might numb Chavista reconfiguration because it's not recognizing the mistakes that might has been made in recent months, and not recognizing things that that somehow point at the government moving toward what I call red flags, that Chavismo is not, in my opinion, capable to support. So I go through Chavismo is still being supported by its base, and the leadership is showing unbreakable unity, something that I say at the beginning, which is absolutely true. And being critical of myself, I believe that statement is also somehow numb the Chavista, reconfiguration. If imperialism keeps breaking Chavismo, it will reconfigure itself to resist and reclaim the country. So claiming Chavismo is not existing is counterproductive. In that case, I believe that that's a very constructive statement, and promotes Chavista reconfiguration. Another one is defeatism by international solidarity will make any resisting effort more difficult. Again, it is, in my opinion, constructive, but promotes and also promotes Chavista reconfiguration, which is extremely important, in my opinion. Easy and fast positioning by international solidarity activists does not consider what is at stake in Venezuela. All the suffering Venezuelans have been living in the last decade. Of course, that's a very constructive statement, but somehow it might, in my opinion, numb Chavista reconfiguration. Delcy Rodríguez government is taking decisions under duress, falls under the same categories that the previous one. Delcy Rodríguez and the Chavista leadership are trying to improve material conditions of Venezuela while reorganizing Chavismo and looking for conditions to change in the U.S. That's another very common statement of those defending Chavismo, but it also, in my opinion, might numb Chavista reconfiguration. And when I talk about Chavista reconfiguration, I'm talking about how Chavismo might reorganize itself in front of the reality that we are facing after January 3rd to improve, to continue our anti-imperialist and socialist nature, and to keep moving forward. So the next one is international solidarity needs to focus on fighting U.S. imperialism and not the Venezuelan government. I consider that this was somehow, it promotes Chavista reconfiguration and is very constructive. Chavismo is bigger than the Venezuelan government. So in this, the last three cases that I'm going to mention, including this one, I noted that the statement promotes Chavista reconfiguration, but somehow also might numb Chavista reconfiguration. So they might be bipolar somehow. The first one is this one: Chavismo is bigger than the Venezuelan government. That's something that I personally say a lot. But I'm seeing that it might be somehow I noticed doing this matrix that it somehow might be productive to talk too much about that because of what I'm telling you. Stating that Chavismo has been overthrown or that it is its spent force ignores the millions of Venezuelans, not just those in the government who continue to make our project. Stating that Chavismo has been overthrown or that it is spent force ignores the millions of Venezuelans, not just those in government who continue to make our project. I mean, basically, that's the people saying that we need to recognize that the Venezuelan government has not been overthrown. Why, if Venezuela is a new U.S. colony, the U.S. and its local proxies keep pushing for transition or for the burial of the Chavista leadership? That's a very common argument in defense of Chavismo. But I also noticed somehow while doing this matrix that it also, has this somehow promotes Chavista reconfiguration, but also my non-Chavista reconfiguration. So those are the things that I wanted to share with you. I know that there's not like a big, analytical and statistical, scene related to that, but I believe that we need to, show all the arguments in favor or against the current situation in Venezuela in order to analyze them and trying to be objective while doing it. So I hope that this somehow helps the discussion, and I'm open to your questions because I believe that I'm very close to my 15 minutes. So they can.
That's wonderful, Jesus. Thank you so much. Perhaps you can stop the share.
Yes, I'll do that. On. When I mute myself.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much. That was a really insightful discussion, and you clearly put in a really lot of work and thinking into that presentation. So really appreciate that. Our next speaker is Maria Paez Victor. Maria is a Venezuelan-born sociologist, formerly of the University of Toronto, a political analyst, and someone who, like all our other speakers, follows developments in Venezuela with profound commitment and passion. So, Maria, please go ahead.
Well, first of all, hello. First of all, thank you, Jesus, for that wonderful. It's very, very.
Just 1 second, Maria. I just got to mute somebody. Okay, I think that should work better now.
It's really useful, Jesus. Wonderful thing that you did there. Very, very useful and great, Well, thank you for having me. Venezuela is reeling under two great catastrophes. The first one was the bombing and the kidnapping, which gets very little media coverage lately. But let us not try to minimize the situation of Venezuela. We are living through the darkest hour of Venezuela's history since 1815, reeling under two catastrophes, one political and another natural one. In 1815, I'm a bit of a historian, sorry. In 1815, Spain sent one of its finest generals, Pablo Morillo, with 10,000 expert troops that had defied and won over Napoleon to defeat once and for all Simón Bolívar, who did not have seasoned, experienced troops. The danger to our independence was tremendous. The battles were bloody, but against all apparent odds, it did not go well with Morillo, and Simón Bolívar and his patriot army won the day, and we won independence. Well, today, Venezuela's sovereignty and freedoms are once again threatened by another murderous, ruthless, avaricious empire, the USA, under the presidency of a known felon, a pedophile, and a malicious narcissist, and who has profoundly damaged international laws and protocols, including the Geneva Convention and the UN Charter, by bombing Venezuela. So on January 3rd, as you know, was the day of infamy in which the US lost all pretense that it may have had of military honor and revealed itself firmly as a bloodthirsty, lawless, predatory force led only by the greed for oil and power of its corrupt leaders, of what is in fact a dying empire. What is important is to underline that a nuclear-powered nation used its most advanced cyber technological weapons to cut off all communication channels, internet, disarmed anti-missile units that Venezuela had acquired. It was a total cyber attack blackout to the center of the capital. 120 people died. Let us remember those 120 people died, because the United States keeps saying, oh, this was a clean attack. What? 120 Venezuelans and Cubans died in this. South America had never seen anything like that. And this abuse was further accentuated by the kidnapping of President Nicolás Maduro and Congresswoman Celia Flores, who, by the way, was beaten up by the dishonorable US troops, injuring her face and breaking 2 of her ribs. So this was a cowardly sneak attack of tremendous unequal proportions, and the nation was stunned. The Chavista leaders, Delcy Rodríguez, Jorge Rodríguez, and Diosdado Cabello, as many of you may know, were given 10 minutes to surrender. If not, they would be killed outright, and the worst, that they would continue bombing the country, this defenseless country. So they accepted the terms of surrender, of cooperation, because further bombing and the deaths of civilians was unthinkable. Now, some people complain that Venezuela should have fought back. What exactly could the leaders have done? Someone please tell me, what is plan B? Fallen on their swords and accepted death, knowing that further destruction and death of civilians would follow? The technically disarmed Venezuelan army was not in conditions to take on the overwhelming power of the US planes, helicopters, bombs, cyber weapons. And many have seriously said they should have gone in and gloriously immolated themselves, like the charge of the Light Brigade. And just as futile, and left their people really orphans. The first duty of any political leader is to protect your people. And that is exactly what the Chavista leadership did. Now, the US has taken control of Venezuela's oil revenues that flow from their oil companies towards the US. Venezuela is placed then in that situation as a beggar. It has to go cap in hand to ask for some of their own money. This is nothing but gangster-like theft at enormous proportions, obtained through a threat to their presidential hostages, and worse, repeated continuous threats of further bombing. But other commerce and other investments, the Chavista leadership are carrying on. Many, in fact, have blamed the victim, have accused, as Jesus was enumerating, accused the Chavista leaders of everything from treachery onwards. Some who should know better even say that the Bolivarian revolution is over. O ye of little faith. The empire will not win this deadly game because the Bolivarian revolution cannot be easily erased. I agree with Jesus when he says that the Bolivarian revolution is bigger than the government. It is not dead, it's not even dormant. One does not erase 26 years of the promotion of political consciousness, communitarian activism, transformative infrastructure grounded on the grassroots in a day or two, not even with military threats. We have had 26 years of continuous sabotage and sanctions and attacks and thefts. But through all of these attacks, the heroic, resilient, creative Venezuelan people have resisted. They have prevailed. They have risen out of the ashes. They have diversified their economy. How many times did you read, oh, the country's going to collapse. Oh, the economy is dead. Well, none of that has happened. They have consolidated social and political institutions and links, and even this year had a GDP that other regional nations envy. And Chavismo emerged as a strong, competent, popular government, transformed the national identity and the political culture. It is strong, and even now, even stronger. And the situation with the United States is not stable. It's not even working as they wish. They didn't get any regime change. Trump considers this a great military victory. like a big bully who knocked down a smaller child. It's hollow, inglorious, and shameful. He wanted to convert this vile attack into something grander, the Venezuelan model, the Maduro model, I have read. Well, I will not dignify such a cowardly attack with euphemisms that only try to give legitimacy, normalcy to what is only immoral, brutal force. It is no model at all. Just see what happened when he tried to apply it to Iran. And where did that get him? Further ignominy was to follow because the attempt by the USA to manipulate a natural disaster. That this was our second disaster, the two earthquakes, which you all know what happened, and that it was an anomaly. The experts say was the rarest kind in the world. Most affected a section of Caracas and the coast, La Guaira. The disaster was horrendous. And now I want to show you my slides. Share. There we go. Here we go. Share. Oh, that's not it. Sorry, this is not it. Can you erase that? This is it right here.
Go back.
How do I go back?
Thank you, Victor.
Stop share. Here we go.
Start again.
Okay. Share. And
click on that.
I don't want that.
Oh, you know, well, where is it?
This one. I don't think I'm going to be able to share. You try. Okay. It's the PowerPoint. There's the PowerPoint. There it is. Good.
Good.
Oh, super. How do I?
That's great. That looks perfect.
Is it? Okay. Oh.
Just go to
I want the
full
first.
screen.
Go there.
I want this
Well,
one.
click this one.
Yeah,
Well,
click.
click here.
And then,
You gotta show it. Yeah.
oh God, I don't know how to do this.
My wife is an incredibly bright person. But when it comes to computers, you're like a genius, which is a joke too.
Okay.
Okay, that we can see your slide, Maria.
That's okay. Now, how do I?
That's this.
Oh, I press this. Okay, fine. Here we go. Anyway, I wanted to show what the impacts of the earthquakes did. 5,000 dead. I mean, this is terrible. But you can see the number of this is the latest data. Okay, this is the latest data of yesterday, and the loss of 37 billion. And when all of this is happening, they've had 1,300 aftershocks and a rain. But when this is happening, the emergency response of the Bolivarian Venezuelan government was immediate and overwhelming, under the orders of Delcy Rodríguez, who, by the way, is in contact with messages from President Maduro. He's not just disappeared. And this is precisely what the US and the supine media and international fascists have tried to desperately to hide. They want to hide all the things that the Venezuelan authorities have done with their bots and algorithms and bot influencers. A massive human contingency of 31,000, military, safety people, rescue aids, so many families served, temporary settlements, the food distributed, the patients, by the way, attended free of charge by the public system. The military deployed were 30,000, and the same amount of Venezuelan volunteers. These are registered Venezuelan volunteers. And the other thing is that what happened was that there was no chaos, there was no social unrest, there was no looting, no civil violence. Pets are saved and cared for, no dumping of debris to save the marine ecosystem, and no mass graves, which, by the way, the opposition was saying a lot of these lies to increase. On the first day after the very first day after the tragedy, 2,000 military were deployed, just the first day. And by the end of the first week, 26,000 personnel were deployed, plus the 17,000 Venezuelan volunteers. So from the start, the Venezuelan authorities have been the coordinators of over 4,000 international rescue teams and all the humanitarian aid, not the United States. So compare this with the chaos of Katrina, the disaster in New Orleans in 2005, where even after 2 years, people were homeless and dispossessed. And what the Venezuelan government does is amazing. It is amazing, their response and their help. Peter, this thing isn't working. You can't seem to, well, now in Venezuela, since there was no chaos, no social unrest, no civil uprising, there was people and its government forces working, the United States couldn't walk in there and say, oh, we have come with 2,000 soldiers because we're going to help give order here. So that has not happened. I don't know how to make this thing go. Here we go. So the Venezuelan authorities control the aid. It was immediate and it was overwhelming. Those that say that Venezuela has been completely taken over by the Americans, well, Venezuelan authorities have been the sole coordinators over the international rescue team and the distributors of the humanitarian aid. And by the way, the opposition is invisible. Further things have happened lately. Of course, 5 months income support for the homeless, housing support for the homeless, plus they started the rebuilding and relocation, and all these plans carried out under the order of Delcy Rodríguez in consultation with the president. The other thing that I think is really important to say is that those that say that Venezuela has been colonized should look at these things, because all of the rescue teams have said that they have worked under the orders of Caracas. Even the US rescue team had to bow and do that. The other is that many people say that Venezuela has been invaded. Well, they only have 2,000 troops. And to invade Granada, they needed 7,000 troops. To invade Panama, they needed 27,000 troops. And that's only invasion. To talk about occupation and of a country much larger than these two, you would need, well, at least 100,000 to my mind. But neither of those countries, Granada or Panama, had 26 years of Bolivarian revolution. Now, the US wanted to go in there and perhaps do a humanitarian invasion, but the fruits of 26 years of Bolivarian revolution impeded that. They found, as we say, un pueblo organizado, an organized country, a government, a socialist government that had emergency planning, a civic union, military union, and with political capacity, and of course, the lofty principles of solidarity. Now, those of us, such as myself, who have dedicated our professional life to studying the health and welfare of societies, know that health and natural disasters are best met by those societies that have what we call social determinants of health. And these are precisely what the Bolivarian Revolution have done. Let me show you. Oh, well, I think well, I'll talk about the humanitarian later. What has happened is that, oh, I'm sorry, I really botched this. I can't do this. So
you can just go down, just scroll down.
Oh, you can stroll down. Okay.
Scroll down. Yeah, there. Just click on the slide you want to show.
This is what I wanted to show you.
Okay, excellent.
when we study a society, two societies that could be very similar to each other, and there's been an epidemic or a hurricane or something like that to them, what we find is that those societies that have taken care of these determinants of health are the ones that prevail and survive. And what are these? First, the reduction of poverty, then the access to medical and health services free of charge, then effective public services, sanitation, clean water, transport, good housing, and emergency planning services. The next thing is education and political awareness, what Paulo Freire talked about, concientización and political participation. And then, last but not least, community belonging and ties, the PSU brigadas, the communes, the communal councils, the popular militia. These all stress solidarity, not individualism. And so those are the fruits, those are the seeds of the Bolivarian Revolution. That's why the revolution is bigger than the government, because these things will be there. And these are the things upon which the resilience and the rescue, the restoration, the rebuilding will be based on. These are the growing seeds of the Bolivarian Revolution. And the other thing that I have to talk about is the world. The world came to Venezuela. The United States couldn't invade when the whole world was there. I think there were 140 countries there, you know, and the presence of China and Russia. You know what China did? Almost immediately sent 2 huge of their ships to La Guaira, plus planes coming and going from Beijing, and the Russians, of course, and they weren't the only ones. So we had true humanitarian solidarity. The first thing that Delcy Rodríguez did the very day, next day of the tragedy, she went and spoke to the United Nations representative and asked for help. And Nicolás Maduro from his cell went and asked the BRICS nations for help. And so the aid was sent by 30 nations and all of these were gratefully accepted. And I have a list there of so many people, of course, Cuba, Mexico, Russia, Turkey, Brazil, the Caribbean nations, even our next door neighbor who we don't get along so well, which is Guyana, they sent help. So this was really, the whole world was there, and the United States could not say that there was chaos. And the United States was not coordinating the event. So this tragedy brought the world to Venezuela, and so many afterwards, is very interesting to hear them. They were saying, oh, Venezuela is nothing like we thought it was going to be, because we've been vilified for so many years. So Venezuela has not been recolonized, as Washington regime thinks. It is in a geopolitical tenuous situation, but there is a strategy and resistance, albeit under tremendous caution and silence. And don't think that the government is going to tell us and going to tell the press and going to tell us what they have under their belt. This is important. This is the life of the nation. And I, who have given classes to the military, and I've met many of them, know that these people do know about strategy and can distinguish strategy from tactics. And so Venezuela is still selling oil, but to other venues, still skirting the sanctions, still doing commerce with other nations, and obtaining some greatly needed investment. But all this is done through the Venezuelan government, not Washington. And this is done despite the supine, horrible, detestable media that the right wing, these fascists of the world have paid for, sent media down there to put microphones on the faces of people who are crying, and all they wanted to do was to say that the government was failing, that they didn't know what they were doing. No country in the world has had to endure a catastrophe of this magnitude, and instead of being reported with sympathy, humanitarian respect, we were subject to a vile, disgusting medium barrage of innuendos and accusations, false videos, AI, and saying all kinds of things, who are trying to paint a failed state. But you can't go against truth, and the truth, the people of Venezuela know it. So I end up by saying to all of you who are outside the country, that This is what we should concentrate on. First of all, unity, like Jesus has said. No use fighting each other over what this word means or the other. If one of us in the solidarity doesn't like or understand what the other one is saying, don't, for heaven's sake, write an email and send it to all. Pick up your phone and talk to us. And the second thing is international solidarity. What should it be concerned about? To demand the release of the president and his wife, to demand the cessation of sanctions, to demand the 22 billion of Venezuelan illegally appropriated assets. And in England, to demand the release of 31 tons of Venezuelan oil in the Bank of England. And I should say, the removal of the 2,000 US troops from Venezuela who were uninvited and are not needed. So this is what we must unite around. So thank you very much. And sorry that I botched this whole thing up with the presentation.
Not at all, Maria. It was perfectly fine. It worked out, and I think that you gave a really impressive and I think very up-to-date account of what's going on there now. Really appreciated. Thank you so much. And our next speaker now is Arnold August. Arnold August is an author, journalist, political scientist. He's written lots of books about Cuba in particular, but also generally keeps an eye on what's happening in Venezuela. So Arnold, please go ahead.
Thank you very much for inviting me, and congratulations to those who just spoke, and in advance, congratulations to Francisco.
Sorry to interrupt you, Arnold. Maria, could you stop sharing, please?
Yes, I'm trying. Oh, here we go.
That's great. Okay. Continue, Arnold. Sorry to interrupt you.
And thank in advance to Francisco, even before he speaks. I have to admit, I have a confession to make, and it's the following. Since January 3rd, 2026, I have changed my mind several times on the issue of January 3rd, 2026, going from one extreme, if you may say, saying that there was some kind of a treason, if not by the Rodríguez and the higher ups of the Venezuelan government, to a far more reasonable position now of supporting the government and everything that it's doing, also from a critical standpoint, which is very similar to Jesus. Now, why did I change my mind? Like, this is the first time in my political writing career that I've changed my mind on an issue so often. I'm not ashamed to say it, because why are we having this webinar? Because there's a lot of confusion, and I was one of the people involved in this confusion. For example, on the issue of on Russian SMO against Ukraine, I was never confused. I had the same position the day after until now. On the issue of Iran, a few years ago, the so-called women's movement for regime change, and more recently this year, I never bought into that, nor into the position that Iran is governed by a dictatorial theocracy. On the contrary, I always held the same position, that Iran is led by a revolutionary, anti-imperialist state. On the issue of China, never confused about the Hong Kong rioters or Tibet or whatever. And on the issue of Palestine, not only never changed ideas on Palestine, but always firmly supported the resistance of the Palestinian people in Palestine, as well as in Lebanon, against the US. Same thing with regards to Venezuela before the current situation, when there was a lot of pressure for regime change as a result of so-called rigged elections. I never fell for that. And Bolivia as well. Always supported on the right side of Bolivia, and of course, Nicaragua. Now, and including Cuba, there's a lot of pressure on Cuba over the years. Not have I not changed my mind on the issue of the Cuban Revolution, but specifically, my own input has always been against U.S. imperialism, and as well as against the centrists led by U.S. imperialism, who, under the guise of being a socialist or whatever, favor regime change in Cuba. So I never changed my mind on all these things, but Venezuela did. I did. And I think that one of the reasons is that it's not clear for everyone. I would like to say that before January 3rd, 2026, I've been to Venezuela several times, including the last presidential elections and when President Maduro was sworn into power, etc. I have not been to Venezuela since January 3rd, 2026. However, basing myself on that experience, before January 3rd, 2026, my main conclusion was then, and this is, I have to say, my thinking was sort of inspired a lot by Sira Pascual and Chris Gilbert, who wrote that excellent article a couple of months ago regarding Venezuela, and which I said to Jesus, I think this should be posted on Orinoco Tribune. He answered, it's already in the queue, it's going up. So this is one of the things that helped me change my mind, to go back to my original experience before 2026, January 3rd, 2026, which was the following, that the main feature of the Bolivarian Revolution is that Chavismo is a material force. I use the argument what Marx said, that ideas, when they are grasped by the masses, become a material force. So Chavismo, as an idea, as an ideology, as an objective, is grasped by millions and millions of Venezuelans, and it is a material force that the United States cannot defeat, and no traders can defeat that as well. So I had to go back to my own drawing board before January 3rd, 26, and indicate, well, I should have followed that indication right from the beginning and not fall into the, rumors, etc., that were being spread on the internet regarding the situation before, after January 3rd, 2026. I think that, Trump, this whole thing, I like the subject of this webinar. Trump, is calling this a success. Let's just take one example. When Trump, just before Trump, the day that Trump launched his war along with Israel against Iran a few months ago, he said, it's all over. We won the war. Iran is going to give in. We did it well because the Iranians always are on the streets saying death to America, death to Israel. Or 4 months later, where is this great success? They're losing militarily, politically, and ideologically against Iran. And that is not a small point. And people who are maybe confused regarding this position that Trump is sort of, that it's not a hoax that Trump is winning in Venezuela. Just take the look of Iran. What a disaster it is for someone who's supposed to have won this war 4 years ago, several months ago. And I would like to just mention one other thing, that what the matriz that Jesus did, I think it's very good. Correct me if I'm wrong, Jesus, but your matriz pretty much reflects the editorial line of Orinoco Tribune, which I admire. Orinoco Tribune, in the midst of all this fog, reproduces opinions of all sorts, including the treason position, the non-treason position, Chavismo, all out for Chavismo. They're all there, so people could see for themselves and draw their own conclusion. This is a very important contribution by Orinoco Tribune. I think it's the best in the English-speaking world, so people can draw their own conclusions in a situation which, as I admitted myself, is so complicated that even people with experience such as me, I was confounded many times. And as far as being confounded, I have to admit, one of the things that contributed to my confusion at one point is when I last visited Cuba in April 2026. I was, speaking to all my Cuban friends and colleagues who are all revolutionaries, members of the Communist Party of Cuba. And, Cuba is not homogeneous. And they all say pretty much the same thing, that there was treason some way or the other, without mentioning anything. And I sort of went with that. At the same time, one has to take into account the Cubans' view might be a bit skewed, because they lost 32 people in that American attack, and they're bitter, and I don't blame them. But I think this bitterness has gone over the top, and they're, some of these people are blaming, if it's not the government as such, are blaming the current administration in Venezuela for what is happening there, but I think that is not founded. You know, on the one hand, you know, we talk about who is an expert on Venezuela. I think one of the best experts is the Cuban state, because while on the one hand, the United States smears Cuba and Venezuela by saying that the Cuban intelligence is integrated into Venezuelan intelligence, to a large extent, it's true. So if anyone knows about what is happening in Venezuela, it's the Cubans. I mean, it's not an accident. 32 were killed there. 32 Cubans were killed there defending Maduro and the First Lady. So I would see, you know, taking everything into account, I would say, firstly, the most important thing is that Trump, we cannot, what Trump says is victorious, we cannot take it seriously on anything. Secondly, my point is that Chavismo, as others have stated, is bigger than a government. It is a material force, and it cannot be defeated by traitors nor by military repression. And I would say in terms of the main demands, Maria mentioned several. I would say, in my view, should be one main demand, and that is the red line that cannot be crossed. In my view, it is the immediate release of President Maduro and First Lady and Deputy Silvia Flores. Why? Maduro is in a cell, approximately 4 by 6 feet, steel bed, allowed to go out for a walk 1 hour every 3 days. They're actually torturing him to death. How can we stand idly by, anyone, without making, in my view, our main demand that both of them should be released immediately and returned back to Cuba, to Venezuela. And I think that he's going to be in court in a few days' time. This is on the heels of a new declassified U.S. document that says there was no rigging of the elections in Venezuela in 2020, period. Then if that's the case, why the hell is he in jail? I mean, one of the main things that they have against Maduro is rigged elections. This is a completely false. I was there for the election. They were not rigged. They were safe, and they were fair, and Maduro won because of Chavismo and because of carrying on the tradition of Hugo Chavez. Thank you.
Fantastic, Arnold. Thank you so much. Again, so informative, and I think to the point. We'll now go to our final speaker. Our final speaker is Francisco Dominguez. Francisco is secretary and has been for many, many decades of the Venezuela Solidarity Campaign. And like all the other speakers, he's up to his gills in engagement with what's going on in Venezuela, with the attack there, and of course also now with the recent earthquake. And Francisco will start speaking now, and I will share 3 articles that he wishes to share with everybody in the chat. Francisco, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Radka, and thank you very much to the International Manifesto Group for organizing this meeting at this time, especially focusing in an important way on this question of the sections of the left so-called discrediting the Delcy Rodríguez government with all sorts of BS. I want to sort of shift the conversation a little bit, if I may. I want to start with this. The nature of the National Security Strategy document issued by the White House on November 2025, you got it right, but there is more to it. And that more to it, I think, is quite crucial. The key point of the document, which is, a sort of version in the modern contemporary setting of the Monroe Doctrine, which is this: the United States will not tolerate competitors which are non-hemispheric in the Western Hemisphere. And the reason why there are these competitors, China, Russia, and Iran, that's the ones they mention, is because there are rogue regimes in Latin America which allow them to come in, take positions of every kind, as well as take control of assets which belong to them. That's basically the argument. And therefore, their solution is this: it's 2 sides. Number one, They say what they want to do is to overthrow all those rogue regimes which actually create the conditions for this existential threat to the US position in the Western Hemisphere. So that's a very serious challenge. That's a very serious threat. But number two, Trump makes it totally clear, because I think it's his document, that he intends to impose this, enforce it by military means. And that's why Venezuela and Cuba happen to be absolutely in the front line of, the new Monroe Doctrine. The military attack on Venezuela and the kidnapping of the president, as well as Celia Flores, as well as the horrible naval blockade against Cuba, are absolutely essential to it. There is a bigger context, of course, which is the ruling class of the United States, knowing that they lost the battle against China and against multipolarity, they have decided that they're going to stop it by whichever means they can. And at the moment, the way they do it is by war. And they want to maintain their world supremacy, not by political means, not by economic means, because they can't, they're unable to. They want to do it by military means. And we happen to be right in the front line. So that is very important. In other words, the coercion that the United States is exerting over Venezuela at the moment is not yet colonization. It isn't. I agree with everybody that, the government of Venezuela and Chavismo and so on remain intact, and they're still able to defend themselves pretty okay, but, under difficult conditions. And these difficult conditions are difficult, to the point that sometimes the government is forced to actually make decisions which are not nice. And I think it's not our problem. It is their problem. They know best. And I want to start with two quotes on this issue. One by an article that we wrote jointly with Roger Harris, myself and him. I just want to quote a little bit of it. The title of the article is Venezuela and the Siege, Defending the Bolivarian Revolution Against US Imperialism. And I quote, "Our central responsibility is not to adjudicate every tactical decision made under siege conditions, but to oppose the imperialist aggression that creates those conditions." To continue with the quote, "Attempts to counterpose solidarity with the popular base against solidarity with the leadership, however well-intentioned, objectively strengthen imperialist aims." And the final part of the quotation is this: "We do not know the full extent of the pressures exerted on the Venezuelan government, nor the range of alternatives realistically available under the present conditions. The Venezuelan leadership operates under severe geopolitical constraints." This is extremely important. Our job is not to do this. It's not to adjudicate and tell the government what to do. I know the people who are radical enough in many places, particularly in the United States, that are criticizing just about everything Delcy Rodríguez does. And they're unable to actually even set up mass political parties, let alone run a revolution. I want to do a second quote, which is an article a poignant article by Michelle Erdner, Alex Saab and the Fragility of the Solidarity Movement. This is quite short, but it's quite powerful. She sort of ends up the article by saying, "Reducing every painful decision to betrayal while ignoring the enormous machinery of coercion surrounding Venezuela risks reproducing the very fragmentation that external aggression was designed to create in the first place." So this is really the context. And what I want to do, to start with, is in the UK, we don't seem to have a problem with those critics. They don't exist. And if they do, they're totally insignificant. And what I've done in preparation for this, I look at the mass organizations in Europe and their attitude to the Venezuelan government. And if you look in detail of the statements that they made regarding the January the 3rd and the attitude to after the earthquake, these mass organizations that have substantial support, 20–30% of the total support, massive presence in parliaments and so on, they don't have any of these problems that are being discussed. I want to mention the following: the France Insoumise, the Communist Party of Britain, Jeremy Corbyn, your party, and the Labour left identifies with those two. In Italy, the Rifondazione, the the Fondazione Comunista. They don't have the problem. Then the USB, the Unione Sindacale de Base, they don't have the problem. In France, the CGT has made a very strong statement regarding those two things, and there is no problem there. The CGTB in Portugal did the same. The DGB in Germany did make a very similar statement. The same with the trade union organization in Belgium, the ABVV, BFGTB. They have several languages there, I'm afraid. The part of the European left, which organizes and coordinates about 40-something political parties of the left in Europe, do not have that problem. The Communist Party of Portugal, the Communist Party of Belgium, plus if you take, Latin America, Africa, a great part of Asia, but also the Communist parties on the left in India, then these things do not exist. So what we're discussing is the problems that are creating a very, very, very small minority, which are fringe, which are very vociferous, and which should be, at best, dealt carefully in the sense of not giving them too much prominence. What I want to concentrate after that is this. Is the damage of the sanctions. There is an excellent article that was written by Mark Weisbrot, which was reproduced in Los Angeles Times, and it's called "Sanctions Are Making Venezuela's Earthquakes Toll So Much Worse." And it goes through what the sanctions have done to Venezuela. From 2012 to 2020, Venezuela's GDP contracted by 74%. Think about that, 74%. 3 times larger in terms of individual income than what the US Big Depression in the 1930s cost to the population in the United States. 3 times worse. 88 of this contraction began in 2015 with Obama sanctions. Before June 2026, 7.9 million people needed humanitarian assistance. This is according to the European Union Commission. And according to them, 40% of Venezuelans face moderate to severe food insecurity. 56% of the population was in extreme poverty. And then half of Venezuelan doctors and other health professionals left the country, including 200,000 teachers. Between 2015 and 2020, there were more than 100,000 unnecessary deaths. The high proportion of them were children. I always make this point. The Pinochet dictatorship killed 5,000 people in 17 years. Is deemed to be one of the worst dictatorships in the history, in the contemporary history. 100,000 is the equivalent of throwing bombs against the most vulnerable people in this country. So this must be our absolute priority. The second point I want to make is that we need to counteract the media campaign that is designed to discredit the Delcy government. And people already, Maria and others already, discussed some of the points. Number one, the supposed inaction and neglect by the government. There was information about a false tsunami alert. The government was accused of blocking international aid. The government was accused of blocking rescue teams from Colombia. Then they claimed that most of the collapsed houses were built by the Housing Mission, which is completely false. Only 3% of those buildings that collapsed were actually built by the mission house. In other words, the ones that resisted the earthquake the best were exactly the houses built by the Housing Mission. Then Diosdado Cabello was hiding because he was not prepared to confront the terrible situation that was created. There was the accusation that Venezuela was dumping the debris into the sea, which was false, and then that the Housing Mission buildings were made of polyethylene, and so on. So we need to actually counteract this with every possible means that we have available to us. That's very important. And then the other focus that we need to do is to sanctions and threat to Latin America. And I'll come back to this at the end on this point. The return of all the illegally retained assets. It is the value in US dollar terms of these assets retained, which if you take the United States, Citgo, frozen accounts, current accounts in Europe, the gold in the UK, and so on, it is between 20 to 40 billion dollars. The reconstruction cost, according to the United Nations Office specialized on reduction of risk, calculated that the cost of reconstruction in Venezuela is going to be 37 billion. So it's crucial that we campaign on this question, on the return of this. There should be a campaign in Belgium. There is a campaign here in the UK. There should be a campaign in the United States to demand that this is. And interestingly, 14 US lawmakers already, together with 17 NGOs, demanded the lifting of sanctions against Venezuela. 30 UK MPs demanded the return of gold, to Venezuela right away, and the numbers will grow. And on Cuba, in order to end the siege, which is one of the resolutions that have been going around, 118 MPs actually are supporting this. So this can be done. And we need to concentrate exactly at the maximum political level, which usually is Parliament, not exclusively, so that we actually get some serious coverage in the media and so on. And then I want to concentrate on three aspects of what the actions that taken by the government. One, Maria said, the efficiency with which the government responded is absolutely exemplary. There is no question about it. But I want to concentrate on the following. 38,292 people received medical attention, either in hospitals or in private clinics, all paid by the Venezuelan government. This is very important indeed to actually highlight. People do not know that this is going on. 107 camps for temporary accommodation with as many facilities as possible have been established so that people are not actually living in the streets in little tents and so on. And more important than that, there is an initiative that was taken to the National Assembly, which just approved a law project to build 20,000 new houses, to cover for the deficit created by the earthquake. And these houses will be subsidized up to 80% of this value. And the Venezuelan government has been able in the last 5-6 years to build 5 million houses. So to build 25,000 is not a problem. And therefore, this again should be highlighted. The government is not only taking care of the immediate problems created by the earthquake, but it's also completely going for, the medium term and the long term in order to address all the problems and so on. There are already 40 sites in La Guaira that have been identified as, areas that do not risk for buildings there being built and then collapse because of earthquake. Already they've been identified and the government is likely to buy them. And then our demands, which have been made several times already, but I want to repeat them. The safe return to Venezuela, and this we will done, the immediate and unconditional safe return to Venezuela, President Maduro and First Lady Silvia Flores. The lifting of all US, European Union and other sanctions against Venezuela and Cuba, pointing out to the devastating consequences on the people and the country that these sanctions have had on them. And then the return to Venezuela of all her illegal confiscating or retained assets. And finally, counteract the malicious corporate media campaign against the Venezuelan government. So in terms of change the emphasis of things in order to ensure that people understand how much support there is for the Venezuelan Bolivarian revolution, which need to actually highlight the mass organizations, the MST in Brazil, the Landless Movement, the Workers' Party in Brazil, the Mexican government, the Morena political party, the FMLN, the FSLN, and so all of these parties, which have thousands, if not millions of members, are supporting the Bolivarian revolution, and they understand the complexities of the situation they face. We should not waste too much time, although only the necessary one, to concentrate on these little pesky problems that do not have any significance. I leave it there. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Francisco. I think we will now have questions and answers. So those who would like to raise questions for any of the panelists, please go ahead. I can see one already. So yes, let's go to Adelaida Shelley. Go ahead, please.
Hi, good morning, or at least good morning where I am. First of all, thank you so much for putting this together, and to all the speakers. I think it's been a struggle here on my end, debating constantly with people this topic, and being one of the few who still kind of keeps their head up high with regards to the Chavista government. So it's been helpful. My question was really, I wanted to ask the different speakers to speak on their evaluation or their understanding of, one of the first things that came out of Diosdado and them was the call for unity, that kind of unbreakable unity across the country. And at first, I was very confused by that, and I didn't understand why they were calling for unity instead of confrontation. And but I think over time, I've changed my mind about that. So I'd like this. I would just ask if anyone would like to also share their thoughts on putting unity at the center of everything in this particular context.
Great question. Thank you so much. Is there any other, or shall we just, maybe while we wait for the others, I will ask the speakers to just address this question first.
Well, if I may say something.
Yes, of course, Maria, please.
Unity is what our liberator, Simón Bolívar, urged us more than 200 years ago. He understood that as we faced a formidable enemy in the Spanish Empire, the only thing that could help us win our independence was the unity of the people. There were other attempts, basically done by the white upper classes. Those failed. And when he called for unity, he meant the unity of all the Venezuelans, of the black slaves, or the black people who were liberated, of the pardos, of the whites in Venezuela, of the indigenous peoples. So Bolivar's army, Patriot Army, was successful because of the unity that he brought to all the different peoples in Venezuela. By the way, in a time of great stratification, he brought that. Chavez, our liberator in this modern age, told us the very same thing: unity, unity, unity. And when Diosdado Cabello talks about unity, we hear, because we know our history, we hear the words of Chavez and we hear the words of Bolívar. We are confronting a terrible, very powerful enemy, and enemies within Venezuela too, okay? This treacherous opposition, not all the opposition, but the opposition, that's extreme. So yes, he is calling us to be united, not show any chink right now in our determination to remain a state, a united republic, a sovereign country, despite the things that are happening. And again, I say to you, when England was fighting the Nazis, there was an act of a Secret Service Act, and many things were secret. They were not told to the press. They were not, spoken of. And people were told to be careful what you're saying because there are voices everywhere. This is the same situation that Venezuela is right now. You're not going to hear what they're actually saying in cabinet. You're not going to hear what the PSUV is saying. You're not going to hear what the communes are talking about, because it's a very dangerous situation. And they have a strategy and they have an ideas of how to survive. But we need to have unity and we need to have faith in those leaderships. That's why he's calling for I believe that's why he's calling us to be united.
Does anybody else want to say anything to this particular question? Arnold, yes, go ahead.
Thank you very much for that question. I think it's a very pertinent unity versus confrontation. Of course, in the imperialist core, it's very easy for people to say, oh, let's go for confrontation. But Maria pointed out in her talk, amongst other things, that if Delcy and the rest of the Bolivarian government would have opted for confrontation, there would have been a bloodbath, which would have resulted in irreparable damage to the Chavista movement. And I think that this is very important. I mean, those in the imperialist core who are calling for Venezuela should go for confrontation, I would call on them, how about you organize a confrontation against the US government, against a two-party system, and all the crime that is carrying on against the peoples of the world? That is where confrontation is needed, not in Venezuela.
I think, Francisco, you want to say something as well?
So got the sun in my face, that's what I cannot see that well. I want to say this when it comes to the question of unity. When the nation is under pressure from imperialism, maximum unity, maximum national unity is absolutely essential. And the very fact that Chavismo not only is united itself, but is looking to actually expand the united front, which is national, to defend the country, is absolutely correct. However, when it comes to unity in the solidarity movement, that's different. Unity in the solidarity movement is desirable, provided that it's on the right line. I'm not prepared, my organization is not prepared to actually unite with rascals who are totally responsible, who don't care about what happens to the people of Venezuela and the consequence of what they propose, because all they want to do is to score a little ultra-left point. Therefore, that unity is completely negative. So we will reject any such unity. The key is unity around two things: the total, absolute, and unconditional defense of the national sovereignty of Venezuela and of their sacred right to self-determination. Nothing else matters in that sense. If anybody doesn't agree with that and puts an ideological, Marxist or otherwise, precondition for people to unite around those two things, then that unity is not desirable.
Great. Thank you, Francisco. Very clear. I just want to say that there's some mention of transcripts in the chat, and we have now the volunteer resources, I should say, to be able to put up transcripts of each of our webinars on the IMG website. So those of you who are interested, please share and share widely. Okay, we have another question from Bahram. Bahram, please go ahead.
Thanks, Radhika. I have a question. During the earthquake, there was a report that Israeli soldiers were in Venezuela, part of the aid. And I know Chavez cut off relations with Israel. Did anything change? Did the new Delcy or anybody change the relationship? Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Very good question. Who would like to speak to this point?
I can go.
Sure, Jesus.
Yes, I believe that Maria mentioned it when she was also mentioning the U.S. presence after the earthquake. I mean, it's a reality. I mean, but a lot of people in Venezuela, especially among Chavistas, has been rejected the presence of Israeli military, and they are disgusted, to listen to their speeches talking about humanitarian efforts, while at the same time they are bombing Iran, Lebanon, Gaza. So for many of us, there is a complete rejection of that presence. But the reality is that they are there, and the Venezuelan government has been saying that we, due to the magnitude of the natural disaster, we were not able to say no to certain, international humanitarian assistance, because that might create conflict and jeopardize the emergency response. So one have to take that into consideration, but also one have to take into consideration that it is true that the U.S. presence and the U.S. control over Venezuela after January 3rd is certainly behind the presence of those Israeli in Venezuela. So it's part of those, complicated things that Arnold was mentioning before, that sometimes drive people crazy and confuse people a lot, but one has to understand the reality on the ground, and the magnitude of this natural disaster is certainly, according to a Japanese expert, is among the third worst earthquake disaster in recent history. So it's not, it is, I mean, there's not an easy answer for your questions, but we agree with many of you here that they shouldn't be in Venezuela.
I may say something?
Yes, of course, Maria.
They arrived, I'm going to say, under the guise, that is, they didn't arrive, the Israeli army, they arrived, we are a humanitarian rescue team. Under that sort of thing. Myself, I would have ordered them back into their plane and out of the country, because it is an incredible hypocrisy that the United States threatened Venezuela to convert Caracas into Gaza, like they are done. And I have, what I'm going to say, I don't have any proof except of what I have read. But that kidnapping of Maduro is something that the Israelis have done in the Middle East. So I think that the United States certainly took some lessons from them. But however, if it was a rescue team that arrived from Israel, it would have been very hard for the Venezuelan government to say, oh, we don't want you. We want all the other rescue teams, but not you. Like Jesus says, it would have been very difficult for them to say that. But I'm disgusted too. I wish they weren't there. Sorry.
Thank you, Maria. We have another question from Thrasivulos, and then I also have a question which I will add to his question, and then we will have a final round, unless there are other speakers, other people in the audience who have questions. So please go ahead, Thrasivulos.
Thank you so much, Radhika. Can you hear me?
Yes, very well.
Okay. First of all, what I want to say is always in the spirit of solidarity, international solidarity with Chavismo. I don't want to be misunderstood. Secondly, I have the utmost respect, highest respect for all the achievements of Chavismo, and especially of this government and the Chavista bases after the earthquake under those very dire circumstances. I want this to be clear because I think Alan might have misunderstood me on the chat, and now I want to bring my one criticism and then questions. My one criticism would be for the declaration of the Foreign Ministry of Venezuela, Foreign Minister Gil, at the day of the first aggression of the United States against Iran. It was really very soft. I saw it with my eyes on the website, and after a few hours, it was taken down completely. And I would like a comment on this and why this happened and what it would possibly mean. And then I would like to confirm or not some things that were written in the press, not the imperialist press, but on the pro-resistance or pro-Chavismo press, Western press anyway, about the following things. After the earthquake, is there or is there not a presence of officials from the Zionist entity in Caracas in Venezuela? And if yes, when is it going to end? And in relation to that, what is the exact relationship of the state of Venezuela to the Zionist entity after January the 3rd? Then a similar question, we also read that white helmets of the so-called Syria nowadays were there. Is it true or false? And if true, why? And the last thing would be, oh, I forgot, but I can read my own chat. The Zionists, the extradition of Alex Saab. I was really shocked when I read it, and of course, this is true. This is not false. And I would like a comment on that. Why was it necessary? Why did it have to happen? And what does this mean for the relationship of Venezuela to the U.S. imperialists? Thank you so much again. Solidarity and support for Chavismo. I don't want to be misunderstood. I want just clarification. Thank you very much.
Much appreciated, Thrasivoulos. Let me also add a couple of points I wanted to make, and then we'll go back to the panel for a final round of responses. So what I wanted to say, two things. Number one, I want to go back to something that Francisco said. That the U.S. left, there are many criticisms on the U.S. left of Delcy Rodríguez in the aftermath of the events of the January the 3rd and her swearing in the following day. But Francisco said, that the U.S. left is not able to create a mass force of its own. And I thought this, I've been thinking about this, in the process of writing my own remarks and generally thinking about what we were going to talk about today. I was very taken by the fact that this is really the key thing. If there is one force in the world that could end the problems of the world, because so many of the problems of the world are emanating from the United States, whether they are economic problems or military problems or what have you, or practically it's as we say, the world is in chaos, but all the chaos is coming from one part of the globe, and it's being strewn all over the globe. So in fact, if there is one thing that is absolutely urgent, is for the US left to organize, to essentially engage in a regime change, previously known as revolution, in their own country. And I think that this, I'd like you to comment on that this preoccupation with criticizing the limitations of the rest of the world's left, while in fact being unable to organize a revolution at home, this seems to me a big issue. And the second was that actually, and I didn't have the time to look up the exact words, but my friends Carlos Martinez and Keith Bennett reminded me of two very interesting and important Lenin quotes that are very relevant in this context. So the first goes like this, and this is, I think, actually a quote from The Struggle Against Which Enemies Within the Working Class Movement Helped Bolshevism. So it goes like this. Imagine that your car is held up by armed bandits. You hand them over your money, your passport, revolver, and car. In return, you are rid of the pleasant company of the bandits. This is unquestionably a compromise. It would, however, be difficult to get away. It would, however, be difficult to find a sane man who would declare such a compromise to be inadmissible in principle, and who would call the compromiser an accomplice of the bandits. So I think that this is a very important analogy to the current situation, in which undoubtedly there are probably things that the government in Caracas has had to do with a gun held at its head, which it would rather not do. And I suspect that the arrival of Israeli forces or white helmets or other such undesirable people who we'd rather not see in Caracas helping out with the earthquake, and God only knows what they're really doing, we'd rather not see. But I think this is, or even the law, fossil fuels law that was passed not long ago. So these would be more in the vein of such a compromise. And I think that if by making such a compromise you can keep intact your country, you can stop it from being bombed, this is not exactly an unprincipled thing to do. So if you can perhaps comment on both those points, that would be great. So I guess I have Jesus and then Francisco and maybe Maria as well later. And
yes. Yes, thank you, Radica, and thank you for the
And
questions.
Arnold, I presume, I guess Arnold may want to say something as well. Sorry, Jesus, please go ahead.
Yes, no, go ahead. I just wanted to mention, answer the question of Trastíbulos, and the one about the Zionist, army and the white helmet presence has been somehow answered already in the previous questions. So, the same thing we commented before about the Zionist presence in Venezuela after the earthquakes applies to the white helmets. But in the case of the white helmets, is relatively mild, the presence. What we see with the presence of the Zionist military in Venezuela after the earthquakes is worrisome, because they are planning to, it seems like they are planning to stay for a longer time. But it's important to highlight that we still don't have diplomatic relations with Israel, and I hope that we keep that way. But again, going back to what Radica just said, there will be concessions that the Venezuelan government will keep doing, and we need to understand that reality. What I call in the matrix that I prepared, the reality on the ground. And that's what I meant when I wrote that there. So the question about the foreign ministry statement is something that I try to answer to you in the chat. And I believe that you got confused about the nature of the Venezuelan statement in your initial question or comment. But basically, what I try to answer to you is that the statement that the foreign ministry of Venezuela issued after the Israeli and the U.S. bombing of Iran was not in support of the U.S., but it was actually questioning the aggression, but mildly, because it didn't mention Israel and Iran, and that's not good for many of us, especially for people in the left. And also, one of the mistakes that we saw in that statement also was that it was, as many other statements of many countries around the world, it included a part where there was some sort of criticism against Iranian, right to self-defense. So because of that, because of the outroar that statement created among Chavistas, the Venezuelan foreign ministry decided to withdraw that statement, and it was somehow the opposite of what you had, what you wrote in the chat before. This tradition of Alex Saab, that's a complex issue. Actually, many of us might have been affected by that decision taken by the government. We have many friends in the international solidarity movement that are or were very frustrated because they actually participated in the campaign to free Alex Saab. So it's a very complex and divisive, decision taken by the Venezuelan government. And the only thing that I can say is that it's also part of those things that the Venezuelan government has been doing under duress, under with the gun pointed in the head of the government of the country. So what I just want to add to that is that we participated. When I say we, I'm talking about Orinoco Tribune, myself. We participated actively in the campaign to liberate Alex Saab when he was in jail. But we did it because not because he was the most important, figure of Chavismo, but because of the nature of the actions of U.S. imperialism against him. And for that reason, we participated actively in the campaign to release him. But that doesn't mean that he is perfect. I'm not trying to excuse the decision of the Venezuelan government, but many in the Venezuelan government pointed that he might have compromised information and giving information to U.S. authorities, and that's part of the Venezuelan government narrative. But anyway, what I just want to say is that what I just want to highlight is that Saab is not a key element in Chavismo. He was just a business operator that helped us a lot in a very complex situation during the harshest part of the U.S. sanctions, bringing food to Venezuela. And for that also, we wanted him to be free from U.S. imperialism. That's it. I'm sure that my compass will add more to that.
Okay, great. We'll go to Francisco, Arnold, and then Maria. I'm sure Maria will want to say something. So in that order, and that will be that for today. Francisco, please go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate the one section of the quote of my article with Roger. We do not know the full extent of the pressures exerted on the Venezuelan government, nor the range of alternatives realistically available under present conditions. The Venezuelan leadership operates under severe geopolitical constraints. So this is my point. If we're not able ourselves, we're specialists, we've been following Venezuela for 20-something years. We know we've been there many times. We follow what they've done. We publicize their successes. We read their books. We listen to the speeches year after year after year after year. We watch huge amount of campaign, meetings of every kind and so on. And we are not in a position to answer that question because we just don't. I do not have the information, and I do not want to have the information to be able to answer these things because they absolutely pertain to the very delicate part of the national security that of the Venezuelan state, which is run by Chavismo. So if anybody is in a position to ask this question, is the Venezuelan government and the Venezuelan authorities. If they don't want to answer them, that's fine by me. But asking this question to the Solidarity movement, objectively, perhaps even subjectively, may have no other intention, no other consequence than divide. That is totally clear. So we should not be asked questions that we cannot answer. That's number one. Number two, which is very important. In our campaign, we organize, mass campaigns, mass rallies, webinars, and so on, together with the Cuba Solidarity campaign, and so on. And every single time, we invite the Palestine Solidarity campaign. And almost every time, not every time, but almost every time, there is a Palestinian speaking there. And they don't have a problem because I think they understand exactly what the complications are and the complexity of situation are. If they're not complaining, why should we? Because we do not know. And most importantly of all, given the stakes that Venezuela is under, the United States has not been able to recolonize Venezuela, but it's exerting a huge amount of coercion in order to colonize it. That's really the pressure. At some point, these modus vivendi is going to break. We do not know when, but we are sort of preparing ourselves for that moment when it happens. So given that that's the situation, the government has been coerced into taking decisions that we do not like. Even though we still have to defend the national sovereignty of the nation, we still have to defend their right to self-determination, we still have to demand that Maduro is back, that Celia Flores is released, we must demand that sanctions are lifted, we must demand that the United States does the aggression, and so on and so forth. So regardless of all these difficulties, which are absolutely there, the key for us, Solidarity movement, to concentrate on is that. So I insist, when it comes to the nation, maximum unity. When it comes to solidarity, only those who agree with these points. Otherwise, it's a waste of time. Thank you.
Great, very important distinction. Arnold, please go ahead.
Very quickly, we only have 1 or 2 minutes left. I'd just like to second what Radhika said in her remarks previously, the importance in the United States, the U.S. left has to get its act together. One cannot hide the fact that important sections of the U.S. left have taken a very sectarian position on the issue of Venezuela, without, in many cases, without any arguments, just using buzzwords, U.S. occupied Venezuela. But the situation is far more complex than that. And I will be inviting people on the left in the United States, once this webinar is posted as a replay, I will be sending it to everyone in the US last, asking them politely, please think about your situation. Engage us with discussion on this very important issue. Thank you.
I think that's such an important thing you've said, Arnold, and I hope you will do it. I hope all our speakers will do it, and I hope all of you who have been listening, if you feel the same way as Arnold, that take a couple of minutes to please spread the word. Maria, would you like to add anything?
First of all, thank you, Radhika, because what you have said is the absolute truth. I'm fed up with the international left standing in judgment over us and telling us how we should conduct our revolution, when in fact they have been unable to do a revolution in their own country. And that is exactly, as you say, what the world needs. We don't need their judgment. We would love to have their solidarity. And as I said in my presentation, and many of you, of course, Francisco and Jesus and Arnold has said, we want the immediate release of President Maduro. We want the immediate cessation of sanctions. We want the immediate release of Venezuelan assets that they have robbed. We want the immediate release of the 31 tons of gold robbed by the Bank of England. And we want the removal of the 2,000 US troops in Venezuela who are unwanted and unneeded. And the last thing I want to say is, have some faith, why don't you, in the Venezuelan people? They are strong Chavistas. We have a strong Chavista government. They have not cracked. There is no other political force in the country that can save the republic than Chavismo. So I do appeal for the international left to stop nitpicking and help a revolution right now that is in a very hard position, but would very much like to have their unconditional support and solidarity. And especially I want to thank all of you here, Radhika, for making this venue possible, and for all of you who have participated in this, to listen to all of us talk and to show your solidarity for Venezuela. From the bottom of my heart, I really thank you for your solidarity.
Thank you so much, Maria. I think that's a very apt way of ending. I just reiterate that, as many of you have said, this has been an extremely important webinar, particularly for the left's thought processes, thinking about itself and so on, whether in the United States or elsewhere. So please share and share widely. Thank you very much. And we'll soon be announcing another webinar to go up at the end of the month. We're still working on it. So please watch out for our next announcement. And for the rest, until next time, thank you and goodbye.
Un abrazo, compas. Venceremos.
Venceremos, exactly. I'm just going to save a couple of things before I leave.
You.
Yeah,
Venceremos.
thank you, everyone. Okay, all done. Goodbye, everyone.
Cheers.
Goodbye and thank you. I thought it was marvelous.
Thank you, Alan. Thank you, Radhika.